Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the AltMed podcast, and got a very special episode coming up. Really pumped for this one. Got my co-host Mitch with me in
Hello.
the driver's seat, and well, actually, we're going to hand over the reins to our guest to drive the conversation today. We've got Ancient Jay in the house. Welcome.
Wow. Thanks, Andrew. And hi again, Mitch. How you doing? Wow, getting the driver's sort of like thing straight away.
Right away.
You guys have obviously seen my videos. It is like trying to get me to talk is not hard. Getting me to stop can be a bit.
Yeah. We'll be in the passenger seat today. I think we'll let
I'll sit in the sidecar and let
in the sidecar. No, we're super excited. We've watched quite a few of the videos. We know you've got a very dedicated and loyal following, and we just really admire the work that you've done in the space. But we're keen to have you on, just not only to learn a few more things ourselves, but to communicate that to our growing audience. So we could go anywhere today, and I assume we will go anywhere, but I want to
it's a high likelihood.
Yeah, hard things to keep me on track. Just keep bringing me back in. You know what I mean?
We'll do that, but we might just start by saying a very active member of the cannabis industry in Australia has been for a long time, patient advocate, involved in the organization of the 420 event for quite some time, was the vice president of the MCUA, big patient advocacy group, and instrumental in the Australian scene from long before we had a legalized model. So a bit more of a background from the man himself, Ancient Jay. Please let us know and let everybody know a little bit more from your perspective.
Oh, thank you very, very much. Yeah, not just before this legalization model, but I predate Bob Carr's 4-year promise, and like the 4-year trial, and then we're going to have legalization after that back in the 80s.
Right.
It wasn't for John Howard pulling the pin on that with his tough on drug stance. Who knows what could have happened in New South Wales? Well, and maybe we wouldn't have had another 20 years of pain and suffering across the country.
Was Bob Carr's government that introduced the safe injecting rooms? Is that?
Yeah, he was literally Bob. As a matter of fact, we've got Bob Carr coming up at a Drug Policy Australia event in Sydney very soon. I'll get back to you guys on that, and we'll have a little bit of a chat about it if you like. So Bob Carr, Judge Kirby, ex-Judge Kirby, Supreme Court Judge Kirby, and a couple of other notable individuals will be discussing some of these matters in Sydney at a Drug Policy Australia event coming up. So yeah, look, Bob Carr has always been a bit of a pro-active and anti-prohibition stance sort of politician. I'm not much for politicians in general, although as you get older, you learn to appreciate that, there's a need for certain people in certain positions. Although when you look at the positions and the people that are in those positions of power in Australia, you shudder when literally we've got a health minister that stands up there and is still sprouting out the same garbage that's been sprouted out for decades and been disproved over and over and over again, not just by our community and the science community, but even by their own government. Like we've got I'm sure he said the gateway drug, people use it and then they'll go on to use other things. I've got a federal government white paper here that goes back to 2009 that shows that 96% of people that try cannabis do not go on to use other drugs. Now, how can you call 4% of people that do something a gateway?
Yeah.
It's not.
It's almost as though his political party's ideology is just, blindly against cannabis. Anyway, just
and there's the thing. I like your choice of words, blindly, because that is the only way to excuse the situation in a sense. Because when you've got here's something I told all of our community many, many years ago. When you've got someone of authority standing up in front of you saying things about cannabis, such as it leads to psychosis, or it's addictive, or it's very, very bad for you. Now, what you've got in front of you is one of three things: someone who is lying to you and knows he's lying, someone that is too stupid to know he's lying, or a combination of the both. It literally, because we know the facts are out there. The truth is at your fingertips on your smartphone. You can ask it any question. You go, Siri, does cannabis kill people? And Siri's going to go, actually, nah. Cannabis is like really nice. Siri, do you smoke? Shh.
He does actually say that when you ask me.
I've often wondered. I've wondered why she goes missing for just sometimes hours, days at a time. Now I know. But,
well, so we've got to get that nice indica into you.
Yeah.
So look, as you can see behind me, this is a picture that was taken at the 2018 or the 2019 420, I think. Just people, beautiful people, as you can see. There's no. You don't see gang members. There's no big sort of like, leather-clad, heavily tattooed people. These are just beautiful people sitting there enjoying a day in the park in the sun. It was sunny then. It wasn't so much sunny this year. We had a bit of a damp day, but it did not dampen the spirits of the hardcore Melbourne cannabis community that still turned up. And like literally we had this huge music lineup happening, and then it just came and rained, and we went, oh, we can't do this. So I went and I spoke to the inspector. I said, look, Lisa, I said, we're going to pull the pin. We can't do this. Too wet. People can't sit on the ground. And if they don't sit on the ground, you guys are going to ping me for COVID offenses. So we're going to call the day off. And they went, okay, then. And of course, they hung around because they may not have believed me. But I left. And I left some volunteers at the park to redirect people who were turning up to say, look, unfortunately, we've had to just sort of like pull the pin today. And I went off in searching for another venue. Now, we managed to find a venue at 10 to 4. Okay, so I get a phone call at 10 to 4 from one of the guys. Go, yeah, we found a venue, Section 8. We can go down there. And I'm like, great. So I turn around. I've got about 80 people around me. I said, listen, we found a place to go to where we'll be accepted. It's cool. Do you want to go there now? Or do you want to wait here the half an hour for 420 and light up here? And they're like, oh, no, we'll wait here. So they stood around in the rain for an extra half an hour. Like there was somewhere dry to go with heaters and drinks and an alleyway really close by where nobody would hassle you out for smoking. So all of the wonderful things that one would require for like a nice afternoon were there. And yet people stood there. Now the videos are on the Ancient J page, people standing there for the countdown, standing there in the lead up to it, engaging with each other, being welcoming with each other, people that don't know each other. Yeah. And even though it wasn't the big crowd that we normally have, the crowd that we did have still created that sense of peace and that sense of unity that we really, really like to see coming out of the day, because it is a day about the people. It's about the people being sort of unfairly targeted, persecuted, and literally just asking the community to look at these people and say, look, do you really think they deserve to have 30% of all the police resources in Victoria used to persecute them, used to try and catch them using cannabis? Wouldn't you rather that money be used to catch the person that stole your car? Wouldn't you rather that money be used to catch the person that broke into your house? Because at the moment in Victoria, those two offences have a very, very, very low cleanup rate. As a matter of fact, all you're really going to get is a number for your insurance company.
Yeah.
So they don't even bother investigating. And why? Because they're busy. But then you look down to the facts of like 80 odd thousand people being arrested for cannabis. And you go, okay, now 80 odd thousand people, let's quantify that a little bit for the people, right? So 80 odd thousand arrests. How long do you think an arrest would take? So that's one officer, maybe two, tied up for a couple of hours, right? So we're already looking at like 160 odd thousand, nearly 200,000 police hours of time. Okay. Then there's, like the court time, there's the incarceration aspect of it. We're seeing 30% of the people arrested in Victoria on cannabis offences finding themselves incarcerated, not always directly because of the cannabis, but because they've been arrested for the cannabis, other warrants or whatever are there, and they get sort of like locked away. But you're seeing this, it's quite unconscionable when you realize that 80% of the people that are busted or arrested for cannabis offences in Victoria are sort of like 18 to 25, right? Now that's scarring them. Can you imagine 18 years old, having someone, gun, handcuffs, you've got no rights, you're not a human being, get in here. And according to a National Crime Authority report, people arrested for cannabis offences tend to spend like 70% more time in the lockup during the arrest. Like they really tend to leave you in the cell for as long as possible before going through the charging and the release process. Like they stretch it out. They're like real. It's not just a matter of they're really focusing on arresting the cannabis people. It's that once they get them into that lockup environment, they really put the pressure on there.
Yeah, and I guess if you've just had a joint, that might feel like days as well.
Right.
Really, yeah.
Literally. Actually, if it's a good joint, you can sleep it, so it's not so bad.
It's actually.
But it's also. I mean, I take your point about, you know, and looking at that background image behind you of people just really peacefully, you know, gathering in a public place and doing something which I just cannot regard as in any way causing harm. But I guess what I find is that, you know, people are, you know, motivated by what matters to them individually. And to the person who wouldn't go and participate in a 420, I guess I'd ask them the question, how do you feel about the fact that, you know, 30% of the taxes, your taxes that go towards policing are actually being spent in this way? And I know many cops have come out and actually said, yeah, we hate that part of the job. You know,
they can say that, but that doesn't stop them enforcing that part of the job. And here's the thing, when they say, oh, they have to, it's the law. I'll take you back to when the police were fighting for a pay rise and they parked vehicles in front of speed cameras and they didn't pull over people for speeding and stuff like that, right? To intimidate the government into giving them a pay rise. See, when they don't want to actually enforce a law to get something for themselves, it's perfectly acceptable. But not enforcing a law because it's harming the public. No, we can't do that, mate. We have to do the law. So I don't find their excuses valid. Honestly, it's excuses, and that's all it is. Like when you look at Vic Pol's internal procedure, now a Victorian police officer can be caught using drugs, cannabis, or whatever. It's not a criminal issue. It's a health issue. Now, why is it not a health issue for an ordinary Victorian?
Yeah.
They're the ones having people point guns at them for having a joint. You know what I mean?
It's well, okay. Can I take you to, because some of the, you know, you've had now, I guess, decades in the space around, you know, you've been involved in policy, but you've also just met a lot of these people that we're talking about who have been subjected to these punitive measures. Can you maybe just tell us, because we've had an array of guests on here, but it's really good to have a patient advocate. You know, how has cannabis helped a lot of the people that you know? And that's maybe like a really broad question, but you know,
look, I mean,
talk to us about that?
I can take you through a number of sort of like points there. I think I can take you through some very relevant close ones. A few years ago, as part of my sort of advocacy roles, I spent some time with an oil maker in New South Wales. During that process, there was a person in Sydney that required some cannabis oil. They'd had a diagnosis of stage 4 lung cancer. No treatment on offer. They were going to be dead in a matter of 20 weeks, right? The person, through their partner, reached out to an old school friend who just happened to go to, like, was engaged to a friend of mine. And he got in touch with me knowing I was in the cannabis sort of like advocacy sort of thing. And he's gone, look, I've like, this is a really weird question, but would you know how this could happen? And I went, actually, look, it's weird. Here's this, that's the universe doing something, man. I'm actually with one of those people at this moment in time. Can I just connect you? You know, can we just put these people together? And he's gone, oh man, that'd be brilliant. So I let them do their thing. Obviously I couldn't participate in the actual transaction or anything like that. But I was then, like, literally within 12 hours, I was on the road with this oil maker. Like, that's how fast this was. Like, there's somebody dying down the road. This guy packed up his stuff. You know what I mean? He's like, okay, let's go. And we traveled like 7 hours to this total stranger's house in this very, very upmarket area, Porsche parked in it, next to a Mercedes in the driveway, on the north shore of Sydney, right? Very upmarket area. And this stockbroker, I can't use names, was there, and we sat down this wasn't a on-camera thing. This was purely and simply so like I could get a more thorough understanding of what was going on, because these are the people I was, representing. So I sat there while they had this chat. Like the guy had smoked like cannabis, like in his teens, but he was now like in his 50s, not used any kind of thing like in between. And the treatment was a combination of full extract cannabis oil, which is like your black tar, and a concentrate that had been created into mixed with a terpene analog, put into vapor cartridges, because the oil had to get direct contact to the lung tissue where the tumor was. So it was actually being taken in a vapor form, as also for immediate pain relief, as you often find with people. A lot of patients smoke and you go, oh, if you're sick, why are you smoking? The fastest way you're going to get pain relief from cannabis is through ignition. Like ingestion is a better pain relief, but it doesn't, like that's 40 minutes later. If you literally, if you're in agony, you want relief now. So people will, they'll smoke or whatever. So there's often been a bit of a misconception around that side of things. So this guy, I've had this huge discussion, and he's been put onto this vape thing there just to see to gauge his results, so that the guy can, this guy's been doing this for years, this oil maker, and he's dealt with hundreds, if not thousands of patients across the country. And to watch the care and to watch the professionalism like that was happening here, it was almost like sitting there watching a specialist with a patient, the amount of consideration and the listening. It was this really active listening where he was really drawing out the information from this guy. So, we left like 2 hours later, I left my phone number with the couple. I said, look, if there's anything, just give me a call. And I got a phone call like 7 months later from the partner, the wife. Like, well, she wasn't the wife then, but 30 minutes later she was going to be, because they were about to walk down the aisle in this little sort of like village somewhere in Germany, this little picturesque sort of chapel. And they just had this thing where they just went, we should really tell him. And they rang me just to say thank you, because I was the one that sort of had like been the contact, because like literally he'd done his dosage. He was in complete remission. So here was a guy that was going to be dead in a matter of weeks, that was now about to start the next part of his life with a new bride. I mean, that was beautiful. That was powerful. It was like, for me, it was a very, very moving moment. I laid there, like literally shed a tear, just listening, because it was like 8:30 in the morning. I'm like, who the hell's ringing me? But the time zone difference, it's like, I'm like, probably hello. And she's like, hello, this you remember me? And I went, oh yeah, hey, how is things? And yeah, so I mean, that's a personal sort of story, I guess, that literally, that's a life that literally would be gone. There's no two ways of looking at that.
Totally.
I imagine was dead because the doctors were not offering a treatment.
Yeah, and you hadn't heard from them, so you just would have assumed the worst. And yeah, that's what an amazing story. Actually, that's crazy.
In all honesty, forgive me for this, but I didn't really think about it again. I didn't really, it wasn't really in my mind. It was just so much happens. And I like at that period of time, I was meeting a lot of patients. I was meeting a lot of healers, trying to really gauge, because what people don't understand is that when the illicit oil industry was kind of built, it was built as a band-aid solution for the thousands of patients across Australia in need. And it was supposed to only be there for a little while back in the 80s. It never did. And the oil industry kind of grew because more and more patients were hearing about it and more people were seeking it. So all of a sudden it started to be, popping up. And then you started to getting people involved in it that weren't always doing it for the right reasons. And then you started to see adulterated products hitting the market. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a weird sort of thing. It should never have got to the point where it is, because legalization, as far as medical goes, and even now it's too limited. The access is too limited. There's too many things wrong, where you've got so many patients, so many people in need that are unnecessarily suffering, where we have, like in Australia, we've got millions of people that use cannabis on a daily basis, which means every single day, tons of cannabis are produced, distributed, and consumed. And that's not joking. That's like literally, start doing the figures, right?
Yep.
It's like 5-7 million stoners conservatively. We reckon closer to 12, but that's, a lot of people can't say because they got jobs. But it's like you start to look at that many people, even just buying a gram of cannabis a day. And we all know a steady cannabis smoker smokes more than a gram a day.
Yeah.
It's the volume that is being produced now to satisfy the illicit market. So there is no reason for that volume not to be produced for the medical market. All we have to do is transition the illicit producers into a legal framework with safety standards and quality controls and all of the other things that go along with a legal producer.
So what's your take on the current legal system that's been put in place, in the current medical system that's been enacted to allow patient access currently? Do you have, obviously I'm gathering.
Yeah,
there's once again, there's too many controls. Like when they started bringing it into the medical framework, they've started to equate it to like opiates again. I mean, they equate it to opiates as an illicit thing. To equate it as a medical thing is ridiculous, because you're talking about something that is physically incapable of creating an overdose. You cannot die from this. You can't consume enough to kill you. You'll just sleep really well and wake up much healthier than when you went to sleep, because you'll have fed your sort of like your body all of the necessary goods to do all the repair work that we rarely get our body the chance to do.
But
because it comes down to, we have like receptors. I mean, sorry, go on.
Oh, no, you keep going. Yeah, I've got a question.
Right. Okay, so I was just going to touch it. All right, I was just going to touch on the affinity that the human body has and the reasoning behind it. I mean, it's a big, there's a bit of a joke sort of like slogan, catchphrase thing that I have. It's like, you can call me ancient, you can call me Jay, but don't call me late for dinner, because the munchies are real and they're important. and it's that's the thing. They really, really are. People joke about it. It's funny. Go, oh, he's got the munchies. Think about your body. Okay, so your body runs on energy. Where does it get its energy from? From food, right? It burns food down. That's what gives it energy. So if it's all of a sudden craving food, it's craving energy. And it's because your cannabinoid receptors have been excited. You've been given, in essence, the tools to do some work. But like, you're sitting on the couch going, oh, can't move. So you need the energy. You need like, if you're going to build new cells, if you're going to build new tissue, you need the materials to do that with. So your body says, give me food. I've got some work to do. That's the munchies. It's not a joking sort of thing. It's actually a really integral part of the healing system. When your body wants to heal, it needs energy to do so. So it goes, give me the food. That's why it's one of the greatest things. And well, probably one of the first accepted medical usages was in chemo, to give an appetite, because if you're not eating, you're not healing.
I've got a mate from uni who's healed up real nice.
Go back to the question if you like.
Yeah, I've got a mate from uni who's healed up really nicely. He's about 120 kegs now, I think. Well healed.
But no, I was just going to ask you though, whether or not people in the community that that so well, I mean, has anyone that taken that leap of faith and gone to getting a legal product through their doctor or anything like that? Or
oh, absolutely. There's a whole bunch of my friends. As a matter of fact, we recommend that they do so and fill their prescription at least once, so that they get their legal medical cannabis container, which they can then refill at their convenience from the more reasonably priced Australian products.
Yeah, well, yeah, look,
like, literally, guys, like that's the thing, is like people are getting their first prescription, and because of the ridiculous pricing of medical cannabis in Australia, they get the prescription once, they get their little Bedrocan container or whatever, and then they just top it up from their local weed dealer, which is half the price.
Yeah,
and literally no worse quality.
I think that's definitely the case in general. Depending on the type of product, the products are much more expensive in the legal system at the moment. I think we will see that price come down as companies start to scale and start doing massive operations.
No, they won't. What, like the thing, because like any other medical fraternity, what they'll press for is subsidy. Okay, so they won't bring prices down. They'll put money, right, into lobbying for PBS. They'll fund a couple of Australian little sort of like loudmouth groups, right, in the medical community to really start the push for PBS. That's what they'll do. They won't drop the price. They'll entice the people to push the government to cover some of that price. Medical companies do not lower prices after releasing a product. Never happened.
What about in the S3 network where it doesn't count for PBS?
Well, that's the thing. It'll have to be included. That's that right now. It's not actually eligible. So that's where it's going to come down to. They're going to actually have to transition it into where it becomes eligible for subsidy. That's where you're going to get the pressure coming in. Like,
but for example, CBD products will not classify for PBS.
The next 12 months, as the medical thing gets bigger, prices won't come down, but there'll be an increased push for reclassification.
But do you think that we'll move away from down scheduling CBD, for example, which would not be covered by PBS subsidies at a Schedule 3 level?
I'm probably not the best person to talk to about the CBD range.
Well,
excuse me. This is actually THC bomb, white rhino, and Hindu Kush, and the three together just breathtaking is one way.
We'll have to get
look, the CBD stuff, I'm not really, I don't see that as being part of the debate. Okay, because it's the CBD ranges pretty much are coming from the hemp industry. Like it's like pretty much go buy some hemp seed oil to a lot of degree for a lot of what the things out there. There's some good products on the market, but the thing in general is that when you're trying to go CBD, THC, it's like you're trying that's commercialization at its worst, because even down to let's talk about epilepsy. Okay, now until cannabis was taken off the marketplace as a prescription drug, cannabis was the prescription drug for epilepsy. Prior to 1930s, there was no such thing as intractable epilepsy, uncurable or untreatable epilepsy. Didn't exist because it was treatable with the cannabis-based products. Now, even there, where it is mostly the antispasmodic or the antispasmodic aspect, which is the CBD aspect of the plant, there is still a need for an element of THC because of the actual spasms and so forth that the muscles have gone through. There's a need for an element of pain control. So going just down that CBD path, it really alienates the full spectrum of the plant, which is what is a rule we're trying to hope to unleash, because we're not looking at legalization as saying, oh, you can do this or you can do that. We're looking at ending prohibition and taking this commodity into the various marketplaces, whether it be the recreational marketplace, whether it be the medical marketplace, whether it be the various industrial application marketplaces, because prohibition is the impediment here. It's what's stopping. Even like we look at our hemp seed industry. Okay, the hemp seed industry is like on a maximum yield in Canada. There's a record set for X amount per acre. That is 10% of the average yield, right, of a THC rich plant. Now, the seeds are not going to be filled with THC. They're still just a hemp seed, but the plant's got THC, but there's 10 times more seeds on the plant per acre, right? So you could actually expand the yield of the hemp seed industry tenfold just by removing prohibition and allowing them to grow a different strain. Like prohibition, it is locking up everywhere. You want to see different medical applications, and you're going to see it where he's sort of like separating the molecules and so forth in order to derive sort of medicines to the more organically based health alternatives that are made by, like, say, blending the leaves, which is one of the great treatments for Crohn's. You know, so you're not going to need to have that kind of very, very basic organic treatment to go through some sort of high medical grade of preparation, where it literally is a few salad leaves in with your smoothie of a morning, and you're treating Crohn's. That there's no need for this medical aspect or intervention where it comes down to, oh no, it's a medication, so it should be going through all of this, you know. So grow. Once you remove prohibition, a lot.
Do you think there's a space then? I mean, obviously in the Australian kind of system, we're looking for the data to prove efficacy. That's obviously the science behind it. And I think that's the angle that...
Well, Australia's a great cohort. I mean, here's the thing. Australia's a great cohort. And once again, I'm going to go back to this amnesty program that I talk about. It's no program, it's just an idea. But if we could come to some sort of agreement where we would allow an amnesty, like we're not talking about for killing people and stuff. We're talking simply for being involved in the cannabis aspect of the industry. If we could have that, then there's information within our community. You know what I mean? Patient records that go back decades that have had treatments. There are, records of black illicit marketplace pricings and like the fluctuations and so forth, and what's around, when it's around. Like, we have all of the data necessary to be able to come to valid conclusions, but because of the fear of prosecution, because we have a government or various governments around the country that will not sit down with the people that know this stuff. They won't, they're not involving the communities, the cannabis users or the various drug users in the debate. They're having a debate amongst themselves. You know what I mean? They're not actually involving the people who they're debating about. It's like, you look to something like the same-sex marriage debate. They threw billions or millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars to various people to really publicize and to have this very, very public debate and get all the information out there and so forth. Mate, we've got an issue that's costing people's lives, and we're ignored.
But arguably, reaching out to the public on same-sex marriage is slightly different to reaching out to the public to give advice on something that it has a clinical method of activation.
I'm not talking about advice. What I'm talking about is education. Well, I think that was all more about education, by putting facts on the table. See, like, they put education, they educated people about same-sex marriage, right? And what I'm saying is they're not educating people. Like, right now, they're still standing up going, it's causing psychosis, it's doing this. Like, Victorian Police Department has paid a university money for research to come to bad outcomes around cannabis, to keep it illegal. Where the fuck, excuse my French, but does it come to the fact that you've got police departments paying for research into the outcomes of cannabis? Like, this is a joke. For them, it's a monopoly. As I said, that's 30% of their money they get to just sit. Cops that don't have to run, people that don't have to work, they just get conviction. You know, they don't get convictions for robberies, assaults, rapes, and murders in Victoria, but stoners, every day, every 6 minutes of every day. No wonder they can't make it to your granny's when she's got a prowler. They're too busy arresting a young person with a joint. Sorry, I get passionate about that.
I love it. I love it.
We love it.
It's disproportionate. It really is disproportionate, the kind of focus that is put on these beautiful people here in Victoria.
Well,
we've got a police department that refuses to adhere to national reporting standards. Dig this: for over 7 years, right? They've been told that they've got to keep records of their call outs and respond rates, but they refuse to do so. You know why? Because if you call up the police, right, 3 of you will see a police officer within the next 24 to 48 hours. The other 7 won't, right? Doesn't matter what it is. 7 people will call and will not get a fucking police presence. Doesn't matter if they're getting killed, raped, doesn't matter. Car stolen, burglar, prowler, don't matter.
You'll probably get it though if it's something
stoners to arrest.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
One of the big things that I'm really looking to see. Yeah, look, one of the things that I'm really looking to see, and I look, and it's going to be an important beat of data that's going to come out of the ACT if we can get it. Okay. And it is, what have the ACT police been doing in the last 12 months? Once they've freed their hands of even the cannabis citation, right? Now that they've got that time on their hands and they don't have to devote the resources to cannabis offences, what are they filling their time with? And has the cleanup rates on other crimes gone up?
Well, there's been a lot of...
Are we seeing a better use of police resources?
Yeah,
because there's been no increase in crime or cannabis use or anything like that in the ACT. So they've got it, like, literally, they've had the money, they've had the time. What have they been doing with it? Because they haven't been arresting stoners this year, right? So I'd love to see what they've been doing, and because that would be very valuable to us if we can show that their assault cleanup rate went up 10%. I mean, that's huge. That really, really is huge. If we could show that the break-in cleanup rate went up 10%, that'd be huge. You know what I mean? Because
Mm.
these are offenses. These are property offenses. These are the offenses that make people afraid. You know, so this is what we should be using the police for, and this is where we should be donating or devoting the resources. So I'm really looking forward to seeing if we can actually see a clear indication of better policing in the ACT once they took the cannabis sort of like illegality out of the picture over a year ago now.
I wonder if there's any corruption in Canberra that they might be able to now investigate. Anyway, just hypothetical. But I was just,
dude, it's the porn capital of the world. Any corruption in the porn capital? Nah.
What?
Come onto my couch. We'll talk about it.
The black leather casting couch lookalike.
What? Yeah,
somebody's got a membership to Pornhub.
A VIP access, actually.
What? Yeah. What do you think? Like, I don't know. Have you ever turned your mind to this current scene in ACT? You would know people in the community that are up there. What are some of the observations that have been reported about since this has happened? I know we were just sort of speculating about what are the police doing with all that time potentially, but has it been embraced by Canberra?
It's basically it's a clusterfuck. I mean, I don't know if we can say that on your podcast. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a stoner. Yeah. Excellent. So it literally is. It is the epitome of a clusterfuck. There's so many problems with the legalization model. However, it was never meant to be proof perfect. What it is it's provided a framework upon which a workable model can be developed. Okay, that's what it's done. It's taken the illegality out. I've been saying for years, it's very, very hard to have an adult conversation when there's all these people screaming in the background because, you know, they're dying and they're suffering. So if we take away the illegality, if we actually allow people to access, then, you know, then that's we can sit down and talk now like adults. You know what I mean? Like, we've got the important thing taken care of. People aren't suffering. They're not being harmed. Now let's talk about where we move forwards. Let's talk about how we can best regulate. Because, like, I think there's a very common understanding on both sides of the fence that we want to have an 18 plus model. Because when you look at something like that, like, for instance, do you ever feel inclined, you know, if a kid comes up to you and goes, "Hey mate, you do me a favor, can you go to the bottle shop and buy me a bottle of bourbon and a packet of smokes?" You're just like, "No mate, you're a kid." You know what I mean? Like, when you grow up, buy your own. Right? And you walk away. And I think that'll be the same sort of mechanism that'll happen when sort of cannabis is added to that realm of things accessible to adults. You know what I mean? Where it's like, "Hey man, can I get some weed?" You go, "Hang on, mate, you're in your school uniform. Piss off, come back when you're 18. So right now, nobody can have it. So there's no control over who's got it, right? Which means you can have some very, very bad people with very, very low morals that will supply to anyone with the money, no matter who they are. So a regulation model will be supported by the general public. You know what I mean? And people like that will be highlighted in the same way that the little person at the shop that sells to kids. You know what I mean? It don't take long before the coppers find out, or the bottle opener. It's like you need to get the adults on side in order to have the children not getting access. And the weird thing is, once you allow access to the adults, the children are less inclined. We've seen youth rates drop in all of the legal states. You know, we've seen increases in the elderly, but at the same time, we've seen lowering in the use of prescription drugs. So quality of life, you know, like you look at some of the medications that older people use, even here in Australia. So you'll take one pill for this, right? But then you'll take another pill to offset the side effects of that. Okay. But because of that pill will cause something else, you've got to take another one to offset the side effects of that. So that's the three pills that are balanced out for one particular condition. One's for the condition. The other two are to balance the side effects of one and then the side effects of the other. Then you might have another condition. So you're taking another 3 or 4. they lose equilibrium. It's like loss of balance is this really, really common thing. And it's because of the prescription drugs. They're off their chops. Their body loses that part of the brain that sort of keeps them, you know, on balance. When they lower their use of prescription drugs and they start having a little bit of cannabis instead, all of a sudden, their quality of life is increasing. They're getting out and they're enjoying life. I can't think of anything better for the Australian older community than to unlock the benefits of cannabis. Like, that's one of the things, working with the MCUA for many years and the ladies down there, we developed an education package called the Cannananas. You can still find it out there, the MCUA Cannananas. It'll be back out and about soon on tour in a new format. They're great, but that's about sort of like sharing the information with the people that literally are wondering about it, because it is hard. Once you start taking all those medications, your quality of life drops.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gotten to a point where it drops so much, they've brought laws in so you can die, you know, and it's one of the things that frustrates me, where you're talking about euthanasia.
Sorry, I was going to say, we've spoken to a few doctors that say that cannabis is because of the wide array of conditions it treats. It usually treats most of those things that you're talking about with the pills there, in terms of somebody might have pain, but it stops them from sleeping, and then that stops them from sleeping. So then they get anxiety, or they have depression, or, you know, all these, and then you have one drug that essentially, cannabis, that treats each of these kind of pillars of your condition, I guess. And it's,
well, I mean, that's it. Going back to what I was saying before about the energy and the munchies, is because cannabis isn't so much a magic cure-all. Okay, we have our bodies. Our bodies are built to self-maintain to a certain degree, right? If we cut ourselves, all we have to do is just cover it up, right? Or if it's a really bad cut, we've got to hold the pieces together. But what will happen is our body will knit that wound back together, right? If we break a bone, all we've got to do is stabilize it and hold it in place, and our bones will knit back together. Our body has a healing system. It's the endocrine system. Part of that endocrine system is what is referred to in layman's terms as the endocannabinoid system, is a series of receptors on your endocrine system, which is your glands in your body. They produce hormones either through excretion or secretion. The combination of those hormones then produce things, everything from your height, the color of your skin, everything. You know, like it's the building blocks of your body. Now, because the endocannabinoid system is part of that, when you have your cannabinoids, it elicits that system. So hormones start to get excreted, which brings us down to the paranoia. You know, when people sometimes feel paranoid when they've had weed, right? It's that funny feeling in the stomach. And it's the kidneys squirting adrenals out, because it's, you've like the kidneys are a part of your glandular system, right? So what happens is when they're a little bit starved and you give them some nice cannabinoids, they go, oh, cannabinoids, yay! And they get a little bit of excited, and they little squirts. You know what I mean? They pee themselves a little bit, right? So they release a little bit of adrenaline into your system. Now, the weird time adrenaline's released into your system is at periods of high stress, when you're in danger and shit, right? So all of a sudden your system realizes adrenaline's been released, and you're like, fuck, what's going on? Someone's after me. Someone's watching me. You get this mental reaction in reverse, in a sense, where there's nobody there, right? If something scares you, you get a burst of adrenaline. So all of a sudden you're getting a burst of adrenaline. You're assuming somebody's there. That's that paranoia sensation coming in. It actually has a fairly simple physiological sort of foundation.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Fight or flight response.
Exactly. You know?
Yeah.
You're sitting comfortably in a room, everything's safe, there's nice music on, you know, like the least possible sort of like high anxiety place. And you're like, you just smoke, and all of a sudden you're like, your kidneys go, oh, and it's just that little, whoop, and your body goes, what the hell? Right?
Oh, that's amazing.
That's
yeah.
So
as I said, a little bit of understanding of physiology, the endocannabinoid system and the glandular system, and you can really start to comprehend why cannabis works in so many different ways. It's because it's not doing the job. Your body's doing the job it's capable of doing, but is retarded from doing because of the environment and the diet and so forth that we have today. we're not feeding our systems what it needs to be able to overcome illnesses and so forth like that. We're basically cannabinoid starved. So when you start giving it some, it's like, oh, mine, it's just like, oh, more. Okay.
out of fear of turning into one of your famous or infamous Ancient J 4-hour marathon videos live, we might start.
Oh, you guys have watched my videos.
Yeah, we might start to just work towards the end of this particular episode, because we would like to have you back, I think, in the future. And to
actually, I was going to say, I'd love to have you guys on the Ancient J page one night. I'll do a 3-way on the StreamYard thing. Bring you both in like this, and introduce you to all of my people, and then they can learn about AltMed, and then they can come and check you guys out. How about that?
Can I take off my white shirt for that one? Is that
you can do whatever you want, man. You just can come really cash, you know. It's public though; people will see it. It's not everything. I stopped doing private stuff. Like literally, you won't see probably the first year of my work is not available to anyone outside of groups that I did in, and I'm not even in those groups, and some of them don't even exist anymore. But some of the stuff we used to do was wild. I kicked off this fad where I carved a melon into a bong live on camera, right? It's really, really cool. Melon bong, and made the stem and everything. It looked really funky, but all of a sudden they started doing it across the US, because it was like I have now, I run Green Cross of Australia. I'm a contributor for Green Cross of the World, and I run Green Cross of the UK. I also have a couple of other groups scattered around the world and so forth, but I have a group of streamers that I've worked quite closely with around the world over the last 5 years, so that we have a very close network on a global sort of level. Everyone's one global community sort of thing, like everyone's really, really casual.
Until the pandemic.
And it is, look, this is predating the pandemic. We realized a long time ago, it's a global war. We're fighting. Everyone's facing the same sort of hurdles when it comes to prohibition. And it was weird. Once we started doing this, like literally, I still believe to this day that the cannabis community, the cannabis community owns Facebook. Like literally, we made it our bitch. We've got more information out there. We've managed to bring the profile of the campaign and the issue into, it literally is now, it's in the public consciousness, but we have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, because there's not enough true education that goes along with it. And that is the trick. You want legalization? Provide education. And with legalization, accompany with education, harm reduction. There's always going to have people that are going to have a substance abuse problem, in the same way that they have alcohol abuse problems, in the same way they have prescription drug problems. Some people are going to have abuse problems. And the sooner we have a regulated model, so that the people around people can go, mate, you're pushing it too hard, you're going a bit hard, you need a bit of help. Right now, they can't do that, because all they're doing is they're going to get their friend arrested, possibly themselves arrested. If we have a regulated model, then we can have harm reduction. We can actually have people be able to safely take people to places and have somewhere for them to go in those sort of states. Like, mate, you haven't slept since Christmas and it's July. You maybe need to sleep. No, mate, no. If I sleep, the helicopters will come down and get me. It happens. Like some people, they don't know when to stop. And like when you look to the amphetamine use in Australia, they say the ice epidemic, that is just an advertising campaign, once again, demonizing for the sake of demonizing. When you look to the fact that before people started smoking their amphetamine, they were injecting it. So the World Health Organization said, listen, stop injecting, start smoking, right? And that actually lowered HIV and hepatitis numbers dramatically around the world, right? It literally did. Now, whether this was coincidental or not, I don't know. But the sales of hepatitis treatment went from like $12 billion per annum down to $2 billion per annum. Next thing you know, they're demonizing smoking drugs. Inhalation is bad. No, better go back to injecting. You know what I mean? Get your diseases so we can treat you. I don't know. That might be a little bit, it's just the timing of it was really, really a little bit, because you've got the World Health Organization, leading health organization in the world, going, it's better to smoke your amphetamine than inject it. Because if you smoke it, you can't get hepatitis, you can't get AIDS. And people are like, whoa, okay then.
So,
And it's like
Ancient
people
Jay,
stop getting hepatitis and AIDS.
Ancient Jay, I've got a question. We normally end the podcast with a question around when you think we'll get legalization in Australia. I do want you to answer.
I always say by Christmas. I always say by Christmas. I literally do. You can go back. I did a show back in 2016, Intersection, at a nightclub in the middle of the city in Melbourne with some, I think I had the founder of the Students for Sensible Drug Policy. I had Greg Chipp, had Matt Riley there. And that was one of the questions that was there. You know, the guys were all going 4 years, 5 years, 10 years. And I'm like, oh, by Christmas. I say that every year because I live in hope that it will be. Look, I know the chances are low. However, this year, it could be different.
Okay, but I've got a better question
But
for
honestly,
you.
I think that now that okay.
If we had a public referendum right now, do you think Australia would vote yes to cannabis?
Yes, because all of the surveys that have been undertaken by the media companies across Australia over the last 5 years have shown high 90% support, right? So they're the people that will be voting in the referendum, the people that are actually, you know, voting in these polls and so forth. And we're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of respondents in surveys held by 7, 9, 10, ABC, all of them. They've all done the surveys across the country over the last, like if you go to the if you go to the MCUA page, group, whatever, go to the thing where it says pictures. If you scroll through it, in there is actually a combination photo of all of the poll results from 1 year. And it was like, you know, 98%, 88%, 75%, you know, should cannabis be legalized? It's there. And yet the government say that they haven't got the support for it.
What do you think happened in New Zealand?
Lack of education. Did you look at what was happening over there? There was a lot of push from prohibition campaigners, and not enough, once again, not putting the money into the education, not putting the money into, see, it's all well and good to say, oh, we're going to legalize it. And then because people have been sort of like brought up to believe it's a demon drug, it's you know, it's like Satan's cannabis, it's sort of like, you know, marijuana is sort of like lettuce or whatever, Satan's lettuce. It's like this, you got some people that are unsure. They go, oh, just legalize it. What does that mean? Well, I don't know. So you're creating a quandary. But if you say, look, we're going to legalize it, we're going to put it into this model, it's not going to be available to children, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, they're going to go, oh yeah, right, excellent, it's about time.
Do you not think
they didn't do that? They just went, do you want it legal? And they went,
do you not think?
No, we've got a better educated community in Australia. We've got a very active community across Australia. As I said, because there's a weird sort of thing where we've let go of illegality. I'll smoke anywhere. I don't give a rat's. I've smoked on Burke Street. I'm standing at a bar. There's a little smoking area outside of this little bar on Burke Street. Like literally, if I turn to my right, I've got Parliament House 120 meters away, right? And I'm standing there, I'm rolling a joint on this. So I'm standing on Burke Street. It's like a entrance to this bar sort of thing, but they've got like an alcove there with the smoking. So my friends are on the inside and I'm standing on the outside, you know, doubling up on the space. I'm rolling this nice big fat joint. And I light it up. Oh, it's delightful, right? And I go to pass it to my friend that's directly to my right, sitting on the other side, looking across, and they're like that. It's still like subtly going like that. And I turn around and there's a copper standing like 8 foot away from me, just looking at me like this. And I got this joint. I turn around and I'm like, and I offered it to my next friend who never says no. He's like me, he don't give a shit, right? So he's just taking it off me and he's taking a big hit. We're just both beside both. And this cop's just like, just turned away and walked away. We cannot allow ourselves to remain in this little box where they go, you're doing something wrong. You're a criminal. You're this. I'm not. I'm a good person. I've got a great history. I've done a lot of wonderful things in my life. I'm not a bad person. I'm a very active, a very engaging person. I've done more community-minded things in my life. And I don't just mean about my cannabis community. I've sat on more committees for progress associations, PNCs, all sorts of different organizations over the years and assisted them do wonderful things. Mate, why should the fact that I like to smoke cannabis, mean that all of that stuff mean nothing and I can just be thrown into a cell?
Yeah, no, I don't believe it should be either. I just like to play devil's advocate with the devil's lettuce.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Credit. I got to say, I know that cop gave you a dirty look, but another cop might have come over and said something. So I don't know.
No, in all honesty, I do not think there's a Victorian copper that would want to embarrass himself that much. Can you imagine standing up in the court in front of the magistrate? Yeah, I saw him smoking cannabis, Your Honour.
Yeah,
and you'll go,
like grade 2 telling on your friend.
Him, Ancient J. I watched him smoking cannabis last night on Facebook. It was funny. What do you mean you caught him smoking cannabis? He smokes cannabis all the time. Yeah. What are you doing wasting the court's time?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It literally is that kind of thing. Like,
have you ever, when they do video link, have you ever done a live stream Ancient J for the Magistrates Court at all? Or is that something you'd consider doing?
Look, I'm one of the, I'm an aberration in some ways to the advocacy community. I don't believe we're going to win the battles in the courts, so we don't turn the courts into a joke, because all we're doing is we're actually creating an enemy where we don't need one. The magistrates, they're not dumb people. They wouldn't be magistrates if they were. And there's an actual base of support there. Once the model is like, right now, it's like this wasteland where there's nothing for people to go, let's do this. What we need is a viable model for people to get behind. The debate about whether it should be legal or not is well past. We shouldn't be talking, you know what I mean? Right now, what we should be discussing is, how do we do this? How do we do this most effectively to the best benefit to the country and to the community? That's what it comes down to, the basics. How do we do this best? Australia is capable of making the best practice model that could be copied around the world. We've got the capability.
Well, I reckon we'll wrap up there, but I want to, if we can get you back on, and we would be delighted to join you for a stream as well. But
look, I'd love to have you guys on. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. But no, look, inviting me on, trying to get me to talk? Couldn't be hard.
No, you've been great. I know we're sort of filming this a little bit later than we normally do, but just as spirited as always, Ancient J. We are very grateful. So thank you so much for your time,
mate. No, gentlemen, Mitch, Andrew, I'd like to thank you so much for inviting me here today. I've had a great time. I hope your audience really is, becomes part of that proactive part of our community, because literally the only way change is going to happen is by people coming together and making change happen, leaving it in the hands of doctors or politicians. That's why we're still here now, illegal, right? Get together, realize that only by educating the people that don't understand, you don't have to push cannabis. You know what I mean? Just make them understand that it's not the dangerous thing that they've been led to believe. Everyone doing their best to lower the misconceptions, educating the public. It's always about education.
Yeah. Your voice is, very, very welcome in the mix of all the guests we've had on. And I'm sure there'll be people listening who will have taken a lot out of this, and we'll definitely have you back again. So thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Ancient J.
Speak soon.
All right, guys. Have a great night.
Cheers.